Dear colleagues, we'd like to present our study on the persuasive discourse of war, practices of framing, interdiscursivity, and social moderation on Reddit or Europe. The aim of the study is to identify the discursive mechanism through which persuasive war discourse is constructed in the digital environment of Reddit, particularly within the R-Europe community during the initial weeks of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The research seeks to examine how practices of framing, interdiscursivity, and social moderation contribute to shaping a collective European perspective on the war, reflecting processes of moral mobilization, digital solidarity, and symbolic resistance to aggression. The hybrid nature of the Russian-Ukrainian war makes it important to examine its representations in social media using critical discourse analysis combined with media framing. In our study, discourse framing was applied to identify the general interpretive structures of the Reddit discussions, problem, responsibility, moral, and solution frames. Critical discourse analysis was used to examine how these frames are linguistically realized through nomination, metaphor, evaluation, and intertextual reference. Thus, frames constitute the object of CDA, serving as the analytical units through which ideological and power relations are critically interpreted. For the analysis, we chose the online platform Reddit, which combined the functions of a content aggregator and a platform for discussing socially important topics. In the second quarter of 2025, the number of daily unique Reddit users worldwide reached 110.4 million. In 2025, approximately 620 million posts were published on Reddit. This indicates the scale and intensity of this communicative environment. Reddit differs from other popular social platforms through its high level of thematic structuring, which ensures an orderly flow of discussions organized around news items and user posts. It's also characterized by a polyphony of views, a pronounced interaction between official informational discourse and user-generated discourse, and a low level of actor identification within discussions. This relative anonymity facilitates the expression of marginal positions and extreme viewpoints circulating in society. At the same time, moderation mechanism and the voting system provide an opportunity to observe how the boundaries of what is considered permissible within public discourse in the digital environment are discussed and established. An important topic of our Europe subreddit is the Russian-Ukrainian war, presented in the categories of its causes, consequences, conditions, and manifestations. Content within the subreddit, when sorted by the number of comments, reveals the 10 most frequently discussed macro themes. These are represented by so-called megathreads, that is, large centralized posts that accumulate user-generated content around a single core theme. While diverse in characteristics, users demonstrate a shared engagement with the main issue of each megathread. We have examined this list of megathreads as an object of critical discourse analysis using frame theory and identified a number of significant discursive characteristics. Firstly, the repetition of megathread title indicates a standardized approach of moderators to framing the topic. Secondly, the different number of voices and comments reflect the changing intensity of the audience's attention. Thirdly, by applying a framing dimension to the analysis, several notable frames can be identified. The invasion frame, which sets the ambiguous interpretation of the event as an act of aggression, the war frame, which emphasizes the protracted and enduring nature of the armed conflict, and the tensions frame, which describes the situation in an uncertain phase without explicitly acknowledging military operations. Within the three identified macro frames, further discursive analysis of smaller thematically and semantically narrow frames is carried out. When framing the war in Ukraine within megathreats, we monitored the discursive manifestations of the four types of frames: problem, responsibility, moral, and solution, correlating them with heuristically valuable categories of CDA identified as relevant to our study. In total, 1,500 comments were analyzed from the Are Europe megathreats published during the first month of Russia's full-scale invasion, late February-March 2022. In order to ensure representativeness, 300 comments were selected from each of the five the most resonant megathreats. Each comment was coded according to its dominant frame, determined by the communicative intention. At the same time, lexical and rhetorical indicators, as well as power ones, were marked following the logic of CDA. The identification of frames according to Chon and Drachman's typology provided following results. The problem frame is represented by 630 comments, 42%. Within this discourse, the dominant descriptors of the war include aggression, invasion, and crime. The responsibility frame is represented by 450 comments, 30%. It clearly identifies Russia as the perpetrator, while criticism is simultaneously directed toward the indecisiveness of the United Nations and the slow and lenient response of the European Union. The moral frame is represented by 285 commands, 19%. It's characterized by the use of categorical evaluative terms such as barbarism, genocide, and crimes against humanity. The solution frame is represented by 135 commands, 9%. It includes proposal concerning the supply of weapons, the imposition of stricter sanctions, and NATO intervention. The dynamics of frames in the first months of the war are also indicative. In the first week, the discourse was characterized by maximum emotional tension and focused on the problem frame, approximately 60% of comments. This fact can be explained by the shock effect. Users tried to comprehend the fact of war as aggression, invasion, and crime. During the second week, the focus gradually shifted toward the responsibility frame, 35–40% of comments. This reflects a discursive transition from initial shock to demand for concrete actions and attribution of responsibility not only for the aggression itself, but also for institutional inaction. In the third and fourth weeks, the moral frame came to the fore, up to 25% of comments. At this stage, one may observe the crystallization of a symbolic frame in which the war is represented as absolute evil. The analysis of discursive practices in Reddit megathreads devoted to the Russia-Ukraine war has also made it possible to analyze the specificity of conflict representation in the networked environment. We focused on four key dimensions: discursive framing and active positioning, practices of moderation and censorship, interdiscursivity and network effects, and ideological orientations. This approach enabled us to identify how, within online discussions, the public discourse of war is not only reproduced but also transformed. Critical discourse analysis showed that during the first months of the Russia-Ukrainian war, Reddit Are Europe had functioned as an arena for controversial discussions in which a strongly pro-Ukrainian framing prevailed. The first megathreat in our list, among other functions, served as a channel for transmitting alternative information to a Russian audience. Readers were encouraged to share the expose and educational appeals within the Russian segment of the social network. The second megathreat showed clear interdiscursivity due to references to historical facts and events explaining the origins of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Ironic discourse played a significant role in this megathreat. The comments frequently contained cultural allusions ridiculing the Russian political elite. Satirical illusions within the media discourse of the third megathreat perform a significant delegitimizing function by deconstructing the symbolic capital of political actors labeled as enemies. Humor here acts as a form of counter-discourse. It reduces fear of the aggressor while emphasizing the irrationality of his actions. In the fourth megathreat, we can see a clear discourse of moral mobilization. We can conclude that the position of most users of the first, second, third, and fourth megathreats on Europe is liberal and pro-Western, with anti-populist and anti-imperial rhetoric. In this megathreat, we observe a clear synergy effect resulting from the interaction of multiple discursive modes, including historical references, jokes, allusions, and memes. This interplay amplifies the positively marked self-identification component of the binary opposition us-them, while simultaneously neutralizing utterances that articulate opposing viewpoints. Through such dynamics, the subreddit operates as a solidaristic community reinforced by network effects. So, Reddit is a communication platform for a multi-voice digital narrative where glossia is facilitated by the geographical dispersion of users as well as the variability of their background knowledge and social cultural context. The three-like structure of the content-based discursive field enables the simultaneous pursuit of discussions along multiple trajectories. This, in turn, generates different vectors of thematic framing. The CDA has demonstrated that users actively use intertextual references to political statements circulated across other social media platforms as well as traditional news outlets, thereby generating an effect of collective argumentation aimed at condemning Russian aggression against Ukraine. The Europe online discourse combines a language of facts with discursive representations of emotion. Practices of social ridicule are also mobilized, functioning to taboo pro-Russian framings through discursive invention. The most resonant megathreads demonstrated a system of complex multi-vector discursive support for Ukraine. Within this field of interaction, rational and evidence-based arguments coexist with messages employing ironic deconstruction of Kremlin politics, historical references, popular culture allusions, and memes, collectively shaping a stable humanistic and pro-Western discursive space. Thanks to a high degree of interdiscursivity and strong network effects, Reddit functions not only as a platform for opinion exchange, but also as a powerful media aggregator that provides reflexivity and actively moderates the European discourse about the war. Thank you very much for your attention.